I'd like to welcome you all to our COP26 encounters at NUSTEM. Today I've got a fantastic encounter with Andy Suggitt, who is an ecologist who works at Northumberland University, and I hope you enjoy.
Yeah, so I'm Andy. I am a scientist. I'm actually an ecologist, so I look quite a lot at the nature and environment around us, and I look to kind of do science and do scientific experiments to try and understand more about the world. So in terms of climate and also climate change, obviously, really simply, that's weather over a very long timescale, maybe a few years or even a few decades, dare I say it. And so what we basically do when we do that is I go outside a lot to research this. Even though I am a doctor, like a scientific doctor, I don't own a lab coat and I never go anywhere near the lab. A lot of what I do is going out to lots of nice places like mountains or nice forests or grasslands, and I try to understand how species are responsive to weather and to climate, and see how their fates might be changing with climate change. Because of course, with climate change, things are getting warmer, things are getting drier in places, wetter in others, and we're trying to work out why species in particular, like maybe rarer species, are responding to that. So there's a lovely image of a thermal image of, as you can see, a dog on the screen. Dogs are very important. I thought I'd try and get them into this presentation. And you can see the difference in temperature, that glowing white bit around his head. That's my friend's dog, Tassie. And a really cool bit sort of towards his tail. And of course, his tail it's long, thin, helps to keep him cool. And obviously, just like humans, the head is the hottest place. But there's also a picture on the bottom there. There's also a picture of a plant and a thermal image as well. And what you'll notice is there's a difference of about 20 degrees between the warmest part of the plant and just the flower head bit towards the top, the dark bit there. So there's the bare ground in front of it, and then there's the actual sort of plant at the bottom. And what that means is that sort of 20-degree difference is huge. And given that under climate change, we're looking at differences of 5 or 10 degrees, say, in the typical temperature every day, this creates opportunities for this plant or some of the butterflies that you can also see there on the slide. They can potentially change the environment that they're in by just moving to cooler places. They're called microclimates, like microscope, really small microclimates. And I look for microclimates everywhere. I do field surveys in the outdoors, like I say. I talk to people as well. There's me talking to a farmer in a very heathery, purpley scene. That's one of the sites for one of the rarest butterflies in Britain, called the mountain ringlet. And that also likes cold spaces. So that is also threatened by climate change.
Oh, thank you for that, Andy. That's a really interesting description of the work you do. So we know that the whole world's coming together during these 2 weeks in November to talk about the climate at COP26. I'm wondering, Andy, from your research about climate and climate change and the microclimates you've been talking about, what have you found out, and why does all this matter?
Well, it's really tempting, when we talk about a global climate conference and the whole world, we're looking at big maps of the planet, and we all know about how, like, say, hot, dry weather leads to deserts, like in the map there. That's the north of Africa there, like towards Morocco, Tunisia, the edges of what becomes the Saharan desert, and obviously we get a lot of rain here in Britain. I think we've probably all noticed, that results in lots of green, deciduous woodland and grassland, and we know that the climate is behind those things. But I guess one of the biggest things that I found out, and particularly about microclimates, is, like we talked about, the plants in the thermal image, the sorts of smaller differences that you can get, in the thermal image there, that's just a few centimeters difference, but that can be the difference between that plant surviving climate change by the end of this century. Obviously it's not going to be the same plant necessarily, although some trees can live for well over 100 years. But the fact that it can survive in Britain throughout this episode, microclimates can make that happen. And so I guess that first point about small things packing a big punch, we shouldn't forget that we've got to look at the local level, and that goes for nature and plants and animals, and also people as well, because obviously local people and their communities have some of the answers that we'll be looking for at COP26. I guess my other big thing, and this is sort of something that's relevant to all of you and all of us, is you can't do everything with a computer. So obviously I said that I use both computers and I use surveys in the field. You can't get to the bottom of what's going on without knowing what's out there, and computers will never be able to do it for us. So for all of you interested in natural history, no, your job won't be done by computers in 20 years' time. We are losing those skills at quite a rate, actually. And so we as scientists rely on the general public and enthusiastic people going out, finding out about nature, and working out what's in their backyard, and sending us information about the plants and animals that are around them. So whether it's just on the interest side, or you're thinking about this in terms of a career, certainly those skills are very valuable, and learning about how to look for these things in the natural world is also very important.
So Andy, do you have a question for us?
Yeah, so I'm really interested in asking the class, for the plants and animals they find around either Newcastle, Sunderland, the northeast, which of those might be most at risk from the sorts of warmer or drier weather we'll get with climate change? And almost as importantly, but more importantly, is there anything we could do to help them? Could we create new nature reserves? Could we find some interesting way of making their environment cooler, wetter, things like that? Really interested to know if you might have any ideas, because we are at COP26, we are in the process of putting those plans and strategies together for the whole of the next century.
Right, thanks, Andy. That's a really good question for the class to be getting their teeth into today. So thank you for your time, and we hopefully will see you again at some point in the future.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed listening to Andy Suggitt. He's an ecologist at Northumbria University, and it was really interesting listening to him talk about the climate and his work around microclimates. And I hope you enjoyed the discussion today. We'll be back later in the week with more climate scientists for you to meet and more interesting topics for you and your class to discuss. I'll see you later in the week.